Connecting the cloud. Recording. Hooray, we're recording. Hello, Atlanta Film Festival. I am Angela Barnes, an Atlanta-based writer and actor and director, and sometimes an actor. I was in one Atlanta Film Festival movie a long time ago. Happy to bring you David Diggs and Rafael Casal. You may know them from the film Blindspotting, which premiered in Sundance in 2018, and also was the opening film at the Atlanta Film Festival that same year, where David got the inaugural Innovator Award. Yeah. They are actors, writers, rappers, producers, spoken word artists, and super badasses, and have a new show coming out this summer, sometime this summer, on Starz, called Blindspotting, based on the film. And we're going to talk a little bit about that journey. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having me. What up?
Full disclosure, I was one of the directors this season. I'm so excited to say I got to come play with these guys this season for the first season. Got to do some really fun stuff, which you guys will see this summer. I just want to talk a little bit about, let's go way back. Let's start talk about before you guys kind of had your, before you guys had your big opportunities. First of all, like you guys knew each other when you were younger. You guys met around in high school or something, right? So let's talk about that. Like what worlds were you guys circling in where you guys first ran into each other that you knew that you were doing these kind of creative things in the same space?
Who's taking it?
You got this, bro.
We knew each other in high school. We didn't really start collaborating until Diggs got back from Brown. But we crossed paths at this poetry slam that was going on at our high school at Berkeley High. And so when I was a freshman, Diggs was a senior. And so we were kind of, when he was on his way out, I was on my way in. And then Diggs went off to college. He'd already been doing music, but got really, really serious about music there. I was doing a lot of poetry and music back home and kind of touring the country and doing these competitions and things. And so when he got back, me and a couple friends of mine had a recording studio in North Oakland. We were looking for other artists to record there. So a mutual friend of ours, threw me David's CD that he had made at college and was like, David from high school is a really dope musician. You should get him to the studio. And then he came through one night, and I sort of like, we was talking about that night as like, oh, we like really weren't friends at all. And then like, we were like best friends. And then we did everything together, like, and now we do plays together and we're in a band and we like help each other, like we'll help each other move couches, like whatever came up from that point on. And it wasn't crazy long after that, because right around then was the time I met Justin Keith, who we eventually did Blindspotting with and doing the series with now. And then a few years later, they met David, and then we all sort of agreed that we were going to, we decided to start working on a project together.
So you started off knowing each other in the music side of things, but you were also doing plays and theater stuff as well. So
I would say David had a bigger background in like, David was doing plays all the time. I think like I was more on the poetry. Like, I was doing like deaf poetry on HBO and was like touring all the time. David was at the same time was doing a bunch of plays. And I think our biggest overlap place was music. And I think like I fancied myself like wanting to be more of a playwright that did some acting. And I think David was acting, doing music, and we were like, we can write plays, we can write stuff.
Yeah, I think our greatest, sort of our greatest strength was our total misconception that like there's no difference between any of these art forms. So we just refused to believe that there was any kind of thing we shouldn't be allowed to do. So we just
like every attempt that like one of us, like I wanted to write plays in long form and was doing that with one of our mentors, and David was writing plays in college and came back and like started working with a lot of the same people. And like we were just like, Friday, we're going to work on this play that we got asked about. And Saturday, we're going to go play this show at the New Parish. And on Sunday, we're going to, whatever, like we were going to shoot something for YouTube just as a joke. And, I think we were just really excited to have people sort of in each other to work with that were down to kind of work on whatever and didn't really worry about the lines between mediums at all. It was like, well, we're all kind of, we're having fun with all of it. Let's just do all of it.
And so when did concept for Blindspotting, or was Blindspotting one of the first film ideas that you guys thought about working on, or was there other things that you guys, or like smaller things you guys had done before that?
That was, other than like music, I don't know how much like narrative film stuff. I know like Rafa had gone through a few ideas with Jess and Keith, like sort of bouncing things off of each other before I like sort of got looped into that project. But I don't know. I know Rafael was like, he was the dude in the squad that could shoot things. And so like he was making things for everybody. And a lot of those had like a narrative like thread to them. So he was thinking like a filmmaker thinks already, in a way that I don't think any of the rest of us were.
We were all shooting stuff already. Like by the time I was 18, 19, like I had already done the digital arts program at like the community college nearby, like the 2-year program. So like we could edit and mix our own music and record our own music. And we had access to, like we were getting access to cameras and like, so this muscle was going. But in the Bay, you don't think about making a movie. That sounds crazy. Like who makes movies outside of LA? I don't think that was ever a sort of a reality for us. I think and even Jess and Keith have been like, come on, we'll make a movie together. We're like, fuck you. You don't make movies. Like, how does that work? We had never had any exposure to anything like that.
All right, Jessica Wu Calder and Keith Calder were the executive producers of the film, just for people who don't know who Jessica.
Yeah, who also, by the way, just like one of their films, One Night at Miami, just got 2 Oscar nods today. So congrats to them.
Yeah.
And they had sort of really set out a life of producing films. That's what they do. I think we were storytellers in mediums that we understood and had access to. But they were the first people that were like, no, you should make a movie. And they had approached me about trying to do something between, they found me through poetry on YouTube, these like sort of viral videos that I'd done. And so they were like, well, let's do something with heightened language and film. Of course, David and I were already doing that in theater, and a lot of our music had a lot of narrative stuff, and our live shows had narrative stuff. And we had just gone off to New Orleans and done this play with one of our mentors and a couple of our other artistic collaborators. So like that intersection was something we'd played with for a while. But then in 2008, when Oscar Grant was killed and Obama was elected within 2.5 weeks of each other, this seemed like we'd always wanted to tell a Bay Area story. And we were like, wow, like being in the Bay when something like that happens, the way that it splits the city down, especially when a city's going through gentrification. So there's like this mass influx of wealth and this heightened level of violence between a city that's already has such a raw history with police and with the FBI and with, it's such a contentious relationship, to say the least. We were like, this is a story that I think would be really interesting for us to tell. And then the more we messed with it, the more we were like, oh, maybe one of the guys saw it and the other one didn't. And maybe one of them is on probation and the other one's not. And like, what are these ways in which we can take our friendship and some of the most naturalistic elements of our friendship and infuse them into these characters to have a conversation that we would love to see on screen, and to do it with verse.
And that's what, for me, when I seeing the movie, it felt like it was made by people, like when they always say, write what you know. It felt like you guys really knew not just the city, but also the characters as well. So like in terms of the kinds of people that were there growing up, are these, this is the kind of people that you were hanging out with when you were growing up? Like, is that feel very close to home, or is this something that you wrote that were all characters that were completely made up?
No, yeah, everybody in there is kind of like a compilation of a few different people who we really thought were, if you put all of them in a story together, like gives you a good picture of the city. So yeah, every character is sort of not, most people aren't just like one person. It's not like a one-to-one relationship, but it's like, this is still true when we write things. You'd be like, oh, remember that one time such and such did this? Like, that's what this moment feels like. And so we're sort of always mining our lives, and particularly the like reactions and attitudes and choices that people make to inform the characters that we're writing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think because we're so responsible to the area that we grew up, the Bay is so important to us. Like the way that we can be sure that it's grounded is to go, I've seen someone do that in this situation. It was this person. And because David and I have been collaborators for so long, you know, even though like our Venn diagram of like social circles growing up aren't exact, he's been exposed to a ton of the people I grew up with. I've been exposed to a ton of the people he grew up with. So it's really easy to be like, you remember so-and-so, we were at this bar and he was like this, he did this one time. And I go, oh, I get it. I can put that in context. And then we can infuse it into a character to make it feel like this is a three-dimensional person that you would know. And I think what we always look for is the callback when somebody watches the movie and goes, I know that dude. You know, people who knew him Miles were like, yeah, I know that guy. Yeah. And people who didn't know him Miles were like, that can't be a real person. And everyone who's ever been around him is like, no, that's a dude. Yeah, for sure. You know, and that's where we tried to sort of extrapolate from for everybody.
So then how did, in terms of, if you have Jess and Keith that are like, you guys should make a film about this, what was that process? Because I think what's really great about great producers is when they find somebody who has a unique voice, find somebody who has a specific voice, and says, hey, okay, let's try to capture that and put that in a film. And what was that relationship in terms of, did they just say, go write something and then you came back to them with something? Or was there any hand holding involved? And did they hand you a book on how to write?
Much hand holding.
Yeah, they were really great at like hand holding without letting us know that that's what they were doing. Like for the first few years of our relationship, we spent a lot of time trying to pretend that we knew things that we didn't know. And they certainly were aware that we didn't know them, but like, they would just sort of let us, you know, spin our wheels, making these kind of like ludicrous, worthless drafts of a thing. And then like very sort of calmly and patiently be like, oh, that's interesting. Here are some other ideas that might make that more, you know, shootable. And then we'd sort of spin our wheels on that for a while.
Also, we're like, you know, we were broke. We were so broke. We were so poor. So we're like sleeping in our car outside their office, pretending like we had a hotel. Like we're like driving to LA to be like, these producers are, they're the only people that have like believed in us to this degree. And they did. The thing is like, Jess and Keith did countless things to develop us. They gave us 1,000,001 scripts to read and access to scripts. And we're like, read this, read this, read this. Here are scripts that we loved, read this. And, you know, and gave us keys to their offices. So we would just go in there and like shoot music videos on their green screen and like use their office as an editing base to try to get better. But they made like a very clear investment in the both of us really, really early. I mean, I was 18 when I met them. Jess and Keith couldn't have been like 22, 23. When they met David, I think Diggs was, you're the same age as Keith, right? So you're probably like 22, 23 at the time. Like we were all very, very young. But I think what was exciting and what continues to pay off, I mean, we were literally just on an editing session with them working on the Blindspotting series cut. And the dynamic is the same. Like we've gotten to kind of grow up as creators together and go from them being like total mentors of ours. And we're still learning from them every day, but now we're starting to have a little bit more of a peer-to-peer relationship because we've been at this for so long. But that level of support early on was like, you should be so lucky to ever have something like that happen again. And I think there's like this, what it's instilled in us, I think, is this constant need to pay it forward with other creators. Because had they not invested in us early like that, we would have never even thought about film. Like we would have dreamed about it, but not planned for it.
There's been no practical way to do it. I mean, when you talk about artist development, that's really the thing that we should all be talking about. And no one ever speaks of it that way. Everybody's trying to figure out like where you get grant money to people who already know what they're doing. But like if you have an office with editing bays and you can give some young person who doesn't have that keys to the office when you're not in there and like let them figure it out, that's how you develop an artist. You know what I'm saying? If you can give us that, I mean, they gave us final draft licenses. You know what I'm saying? Like that was huge. We were writing scripts in Google Docs.
I don't think I've ever heard
not even. I think it was Word.
Not even. Oh yeah, we were just using Word and said like, we would sit around the same laptop.
Like anybody.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we were. What I think was exciting for us in hindsight now, I think we were really like sort of sad and broke and felt like we were going nowhere at the time. But in hindsight, like looking at that period in our lives, like me and David's output was crazy. we were recording records left and right and mixtapes left and right. We were touring as much as we could. We were shooting things every day. You know, when they gave us the keys, we were like, bet. We shot like a ton of music videos in their space, short films, reels for friends. We like started all these like small businesses out of our living rooms and stuff. Like we were hungry to make things and needed to like figure out ways to sort of get those off the ground. But like to have folks kind of go, oh, you're really, really hungry to work. We're a new film company figuring out who we are. Let's stay connected and see what happens. And you know, and now, I mean, look, the relationship it's like been 14 years or something. They're still like our main collaborators, which is wild.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, but also too, it makes sense that it feels like there used to be a time where there was more kind of grooming of that you would find somebody that was like a diamond in the rough and you would help them get all nice and shiny, where now it feels like people are just looking for the diamonds that they can swipe from somebody else and try to like, you know, plant their flag in that versus actually trying to bring young talent in and up. Because I know you guys have like your bars workshop too. It's like even just in that spoken word world, you guys try to pay it forward in that way. Or you guys also do that in the filmmaking stuff? Do you have, like, did you drag anybody else? I mean,
you know, all of our
keeps on the show too.
With the exception of one of our writers. I mean, like no one in our writers room had ever been in a writers room before. And our one writer that had only been in one. I mean, like, I think we were trying to grab people that we really cared about and thought were brilliant. And we know that getting in the door is the hardest part. So if we're like, well, we have a show, we can give people their first show, and all of them have work now. Like all of them are already onto their like next things, even since being in our room in January. So I think that's been really
so much about the business is like just you need credits to get credits kind of thing. And so like it didn't, I mean, they got more experience working with us, but it's not like being in our writer's room is going to give you any information on how to be in your next writer's room. We didn't know what we were doing either, but just the fact that they had been in a writer's room, all of a sudden everyone's like, yeah, come on, you know. Like,
yeah. I said it's like She's All That movie, She's All That. Like Lainey was always kind of a cool person, but it took the popular guy to say she's cool, and then everybody knew they were cool. You know, it's like
it feels like the whole industry operates that way. They're just like, aren't you? Oh, you've done a thing. All right, well, I guess you must know. And I think what we continue to realize is, I mean, you know, we're still not babies in this industry, but it's only been a few years that we've been around it. But like, we just keep learning that nobody knows what the fuck they're doing, and all you really do is gain a skill set of adaptability and how to be creative within a constraint and like quickly learn that constraint and function. And that is being a broke artist all the time. Like that's the muscle that we love and have had, unfortunately, a ton of experience with of like making art within a ton of constraints. And so I think what we keep learning, especially through the TV show process, which is a much longer process than making a film, is how many places there are to put people on and the different ways in which you can do it. I mean, like you sort of think like, you know, this is just fresh in my mind because I was reading the thing that Franklin Leonard was a part of, that study of like sort of where diversity is happening in the industry and where the percentages are. And you're kind of looking at like that, even that study is like executives and like artist level. And the thing that we keep learning is like, oh, we also got to talk about the unions. We're gonna talk about qualifying people for the unions. Like that never even occurred to us before. We're like, oh yeah, we're going to get Black and brown folks in the writer's room who are from the area, who are new writers. And then you're like, oh wait, what about our gaffers and our electricians and our, you know, I think these are things that because we're new to being sort of executive producers on a set, we're like, oh, where are actually all the hurdles or the barriers of entry? And how can we leverage whatever little authority we have to go, oh, okay, there's a possibility here to get people in. There's a possibility here to get people in. You start to realize like there's all this other groundwork and like homework to be done. To sit there and go, all right, well, if I'm, you know, we're already talking about if we're lucky enough to get a season 2, how much in advance we need to start thinking about, like what programs are we activating, what people are we meeting with to try to figure out how to use the little influence we have to get more and more people through that spot, because every career path has this crazy ceiling at some point that people just like sit idle for 10 years, 12 years. Some of our crew from the movie we hit up to work on the show, and they couldn't work on the show because they still weren't union qualified. And we're like, how is that possible? That was years ago.
Oh, wow.
And so I think just like looking at those kind of things and going like, what are these barriers for entry that every time we level up a little bit, we can, like the public theater with our bars program was like just getting more people into the public theater that didn't feel like they had a way to get into that theater. It's this prestigious place in New York, and David did the Hamilton early run there. He did a slave play there, and we were like, this is a great, or White Noise. Oh, that was that other. What was that? Whose play was that? Slave play. That was last year.
Yeah,
somebody on Broadway.
Yeah.
But we were trying to get people into that institution, and the program alone that immediately gives you this relationship, and then everyone can leverage the relationship up.
Yeah, it feels like too, some of the hurdles are, and it's been a lot of, like, my Facebook group, people go back and forth. There's a pay the assistant movement going on right now for PAs and assistants, because I mean, like when I started in the business in the mid 90s, PAs were making like $1.25 a day. And now some of them are making $1.50 a day, and it's 20 years later. And it's like, the apartment that I was $800 a month in Las Vegas, it was a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, hardwood floors, beautiful apartment that I split with another trainee. Now is $4,000 a month. So, making an extra $25 a day is not going to suddenly pay for an extra $3,500 a month for the apartment or whatever. So, like, making sure that the people that can get it actually have the opportunity to take the break too, I know is one of the hurdles that we have to look out for. So
yeah, it's the amount of things we have to look out for is pretty exhausting when you start to like go down the list. And so which is another part of it too, right? Like you just have to sort of we have to have these conversations all the time with everybody working on any of our projects, being like, breathe, recommit to the thing. Like, yes, that last 3 days was super frustrating, but like, let's just take a deep breath and do it again.
Cool. All right. So the film, in terms of making the film, that was your first feature film, when you were done with that, were you guys like, okay, we want to do another thing right away? Or like, where did the concept for doing Blindspotting as a series, when did that start to manifest itself?
We definitely didn't want to do that. I think we had been asked a few times, and we were like, no, that's not, it's a movie. It's a good one. You should leave it alone. And I think it was Lionsgate, right? Was kind of so adamant that we at least talk about it. And so we went into this meeting, and over the course of the meeting, we're like, look, we don't think it's a TV show. It's just, if it was going to be a TV show, it'd have to be, it'd have to star Jasmine. We would love to see more Ashley. Yes, we would have wanted more of that in the movie. So yeah, if it was a TV show about Jasmine, that would be cool. But like, we couldn't do it with the moving thing. We do it because it's episodic. We have to like set in on a block and really like make the block a character and thing. And then we just kept doing that for an hour. And by the end of the hour, we were like, God damn it, we're gonna have to make this TV show. Yeah,
we called Jasmine. We're like, would you ever want to like star in a Blindspotting series? And she was like, absolutely. And I think there was just a lot of, suddenly there was this, what you can do in TV, with the film, it was just me and David were always at the center of it, because we were also super young when we came up with even the idea, and that was our safety net. We're like, well, at least if we fuck it up, it's on us. But I think when we started thinking about this series, we were like, oh man, now we can there's all these stories we'll get to tell. Like, you set up a thing with 5 or 6 characters, and if it runs long enough, you can keep introducing new storylines that take you further and further into the subcultures of the Bay. And I think what just was super exciting about that for us was, we know there's a ton of different stories in the Bay. We're like, well, also, if we get a show on the air, then that gives permission to another, Bay Area person to make our show referential for them and go, it's like this, but combined with this other thing. I think for us, that became really, really exciting. And then, so we worked on it for a while. It was very theoretical. We didn't really think they were going to make it. And then the pandemic hit, and they said, if you want to shoot right now, we'll make the show right now. And that was a big crossroads for us. And I think ultimately the deciding factor was everybody's out of work. And they just gave us the opportunity to hire like 250 people in the middle of a pandemic, like when people need jobs the most. And that really was as much as we wanted to wait or see if there was another way to do it, we're like, look, we can be working on this tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And we, and so we decided to like go through the tunnel of Corona and shield and mask up and like brave death to make this show.
And with
so
a
like,
bunch of like scripts that weren't ready, a bunch of like, we were like really not ready to make a TV show because we were certain it wasn't happening until Corona was done. So, and
at the time, Diggs was like not gonna be there. Like, luckily, it worked out that Snowpiercer got pushed, and so he got to stay and be a part of like most of the shooting process. But originally, it was like, no, Diggs is gonna be here for 2 weeks, and then he's gone. And Rafa, you're gonna be the showrunner, and Diggs is not here. I was like, all right, cool. Guess we're gonna be on FaceTime a lot. And we just kind of signed up for it. There was a similar constraint with the movie, so we weren't like totally, a fish out of water with it. But this was a much bigger undertaking, and it worked out that Diggs' show got pushed a couple months, and we were able to actually do this together, which, we weren't sure that was going to happen in the beginning. So it kind of worked out for the best, because now he's doing his show, and we would have shot it later.
Yeah,
that's a lot. I mean, a movie is one thing because at least you have the script going, you know what you're going in doing. But with a TV show, you might have the first few episodes when everything gets started. So, I mean, I could see just being there on the set with you guys and seeing how you guys, working with you guys, there's always somebody that was there, even if somebody else was somewhere else. And even Jess and Keith, which I'll be honest, as producers, they were really, really knowledgeable about not just the logistics of everything, but of the creative too. I'll be honest, a lot of times people that are that have their job aren't as, I guess that goes to talk about your relationship with them.
They're basically writer directors that happen to be producers. Like they are as essential to our process as any, like it's weird they don't get writing credit. Like they're so invested in the process.
Like really smart questions. Like usually there's always like this. We always joke that the suits always ask a dumb question or always ask about a dumb shot, and you kind of just whatever. And it's like never like it was always like the smartest thing.
They're also the best dressed suits, I guess. Like
Jess wins every day.
Jess wins every time.
Best producers probably ever worked with as well.
No, it does. I think sometimes people think of when we're working, it really is the four of us. I think, we get asked when we're being asked about our project, we're usually Doug and I are asked together, but like when it's a Blindspotting thing, it's really the four of us working on it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we should phone him in. We should just.
Let me back up a little bit. So you guys talked about that you guys were, in terms of just being creatives, and there was no boundaries in terms of what that meant, whether it was theater or spoken word or music or whatever. I felt that in the film, but even more so and I know we can't get into too much about the details of the TV show, but let's talk a little bit about like the process of, do you think not being or not considering yourselves filmmakers was part of why you kind of were like, well, this is what it should be? Like to me, when I first saw the film, it was something like, oh, I haven't seen this before. I haven't seen the way that the storytelling that would, it wasn't a musical, but it wasn't kind of not a musical. You know what I mean? Like there was moments that felt almost like a musical, but not quite. I
don't even know if we didn't consider ourselves filmmakers so much as we didn't think we were going to get another crack at this. I think it was like, someone's letting us make the movie about our hometown that we're starring in. I think Diggs and I generally just would rather take the big swing. We also weren't 25. We're like, we're gonna get maybe one crack at making the film we want to make. And we already had sort of like decided it was like, if we're gonna do it, let's do it full out or not at all. And so when it came to leading into the conventions, we were just kind of like, look, we love films that are very voicey. Let's not lean away from our voice the one time someone gives us a budget to lean into it. And so, and with Jess and Keith's encouragement, we just kind of let every scene be what it felt like it needed to be. And with their blessing, right, them having made a bunch of films, I think that gave us like a little bit of protective cover when they were like, yeah, go for it. We're like, all right, fuck it. This is going to be a weird sound cue.
So
I think you
Go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you know, you only make your first whatever once, and it is really special. Like this is also our first TV show. We'll never do it this way again. You know what I'm saying? You learn so much about like what is really hard about doing something, and it scares you away from doing it that way. But like, it is, before you know, like you might as well lean into all the impossible things because it's exhausting anyway. But like, you always have the excuse of not knowing any better on your first time, so you might as well do that shit. Yeah.
So did you find that either I guess with the film you had Justin and Keith that had your back as too, but since now you were bringing on a network, so you have a whole nother group of people who, you know, a network in a studio who you have to answer to. Like, did you find that you had to either defend or explain any of the things that were kind of unconventional about the show, or do you feel that they were good about? Because I'll be like just like cold reading with, you know, people just send stuff and haven't with no explanation. I was like, well, I wonder what this is. And then when I would see it, I'd be like, oh shit, like I didn't even like, there's stuff that I thought, oh, that could be cool. And then it would not be what I thought it was, and it would be 10 times cooler. Or like the way different directors could interpret different things, that you were really great about giving directors room to say like, well, this is what we want. What do you think you want to do with it? Like it could be interpreted in a bunch of different ways. Like how was it when you're not always sure what it is until you see it? How was that in communicating with the network and studio for them to just be like, yeah, sure, go for it?
I think they've been pretty great thus far. I mean, we'll see. It's not out yet, so as of our recording this, right? So we'll see.
See how our last round of notes go.
Yeah. But they have been awesome and supportive, and apparently loving the stuff as they get to watch dailies and things. But it is, you know, it's such an interesting hustle. I think up at the top of it, before you start shooting, you know what I'm saying? Like before the money's spent, you have to do a lot of justifying of how you're going to spend the money. But then like once you're spending the money, it's leaving their pockets in real time. So there's kind of nothing they can do about it, which is like both fortunate and unfortunate, right? But like you're going to get what you get once we're shooting. So like, I think, you know, in that sense, it's a little bit like making theater, you know, TV more so than film in a lot of ways. It's like a little bit closer to making theater because once you're making it, that's it. I could do anything on the day of shooting. I could be like, you know what, turn the camera around, like, let's shoot the other direction, just out into the set. Like, what are you going to do? We're already shooting it, you know? So I think it is a little bit more. I think it's, you know, one of the reasons I think that relationship can become so adversarial is because there is so much that could go off the rails at any point, you know? But so far the relationship's been great. I think they have been like way more supportive than we probably assumed they were. There were some growing pains with all of us learning how each other works. But once we figured that out, it's been like pretty fantastic, I think.
Once they saw the pilot too, I mean, like, I think that was our big test, is we're like, look, we're shooting a thing. They gave us a lot of rope, you know? And I think when we finally came back around and showed them the first cut, we obviously held our breath. We were like, but this is the show. Like, if you like this, you're gonna love this show. And thankfully they loved the first cut. And that was a big like weight off our shoulders. We're like, oh, okay, cool. Now you get what the dance stuff is, and you get what the verse stuff is, and you get, you know, how Jalen is playing Trish, and how Candace is playing Janelle, and how, you know, Helen is playing Rainey. Like you see, and I think this is a show that does deliver above the script. I don't know that every project will be like that, but I think we undersell it a little bit on the page, and the actors are so good. That their performances just fucking lift it up. And so I think we knew that if we just shot a fraction of what we had in our heads and could get to the point of showing them a cut, that they would be into it. And thankfully they gave us the runway to do it.
Okay. Let me back up a little bit too, because you talked a little bit about what Blindspotting the movie was about, but we didn't really get into like what the series is about. Just if you want to give us the quick pitch of like what the show as a whole is going to be, and then like I know is it going to continue throughout all of the seasons in that way? Are you going to try to focus on different aspects, like you said, bringing in different characters in different seasons? Or if you can tell us a little bit about, you know, how the show, how the series is a little different than the feature.
Yeah, I mean, the season is, or the series is about Ashley, who in the film was Miles's partner. They have a son together, Sean. Miles is sort of unexpectedly incarcerated about 6 months after the movie, which you don't have to really have seen to get the show, but he's hauled off to jail, and that forces Ashley and their son Sean to move in with his mother and sister over on 14th Street in West Oakland, and it's sort of about that household and the house next door, which is the Hoskins household, and that's Nancy, who's the mother, Janelle, who's the sister, and a new character that we've introduced named Earl, who's moving in and renting a spare room. That house also happens to be Colin's house from the movie. This is his younger sister and his mom in that house, to sort of keep it tied into the same world. But it's really about these two houses, these two families, and how they're sort of navigating having one of their own sort of removed. And so a lot of the show is about the ramifications of the prison industrial complex and the way that it affects families and how it like disrupts the sort of the communal ecosystem outside of prison. And a lot of that was initially crafted to sort of take the emphasis off David and myself, and then turned into this world that I think both of us are much more entertained by. I think when we were like making the show initially, people were like, well, where are Miles and Carmen? What about their friendship? And like you get 20 minutes into the show and you're like, fuck those guys.
Don't miss
you just
them.
Want to spend time with, don't miss them at all, you know, and suddenly you're totally enthralled by these new characters, which I think is the thing that, as we were like, as long as we can make that happen, we have a great show. And I think so if we get to do more seasons or whatever, there's just, I mean, we have an ensemble cast. We'll get to sort of go into each of their social circles and their own arcs, and you know, and get to play in that, sort of stemming from this story that follows the film. And so I think in the dream scenario, the film starts to feel like a prequel to the show, that people can go back and see sort of how we backed into this story.
So, and I found that it was interesting that the film was like really kind of dude heavy. And then the series is a lot of women. You know, you have Ashley, obviously. You have the mom. You have, you know, Rainy's the mom. You have Trish, is the I guess I'd say sister-in-law or her daughter. And then you have her best friend. And it was writing for all of these women characters. Was that anything that felt different to you, or do you feel, because like you said, you know a lot of these people, were there things you felt you had to do differently in terms of bringing more women in the writer's room?
I mean, yeah, we got a lot of help. I think we, particularly early on in breaking the stories, our writer's room is mostly women. And yeah, we were trying to check ourselves early on in terms of that. And yeah, and I think we sort of, I mean, it's the other thing about television, right? Like you're also writing it in conversation with the actors. And so there was that whole like creation phase where we got a ton of help, and then we cast these women, and then we got a ton of creative help from them too. And then we hired, you know, as a bunch of women directors to help us craft it too. And we got a bunch more help. And so I think, you know, making up for our own blind spots was something we were aware of, in which we had a lot of conversations, but like between ourselves and also with the network early on, in terms of like, we're going to need these perspectives before we start shooting, so that we can make sure that at least we're starting in a good place. And we know once we get, you know, once everybody is in there, we will be able to draw from the actors and ask them directly, like, would you do that? You know, by episode 3, like they're the expert, an actor is the expert on their character. So you get to write something and hand it to them and then be like, would you do this? If I have a question about it, I could go to Jalen and be like, does Trish do this? And Jalen would be like, nah. Be like, great, well, we have to change it.
That's unusual. I mean, I'll tell you, I mean, that's, Rafael had, you know, like I would try to make sure that everyone was, when we would do the scene, like the first couple of takes, I'd be like, okay, let's make sure that we get, because I'm, you know, I came from a place of, you get what's on the page and then you get to play after once you get it, because you got to make sure that you get what the people wrote. And he's like, no. If they want to play the first take, like let them play the first take. And I was like, oh, it's like it's unusual to let the actors have that much input on their character on a series, season 1. Like I thought it was great because you would get these magical things that would happen because they were allowed to just be them, which was really awesome. And so, you know,
I would say that's probably like because we didn't like beeline it for this industry. I think our kind of coming from a theater background, that space is inherently much more collaborative. I mean, even directors in that space are much more about like funneling the natural instincts of the actors, and the writers are trying to get, you know, this language in the mouths of the actors in a way that feels intuitive and natural and that they can do over and over again. And so I feel like in that space, we are trying to be as collaborative and make everyone feel as sort of included in the process as possible. And so we get into this space and we go, all right, well, I mean, not only, we had, you know, 4 other writers in the writer's room and 3 of them are women, but also 2 of them were directors. And I think that helped a lot, that they had both done their first features already. And that helps a lot kind of looking forward and go like, not only is this like, how are we writing this, but how are we shooting this? And what kind of actors are we looking for? And I think that kind of, every time we would ask people like, well, how do you put a show together? We get like 20 different answers. Nobody does it the same way. And so I think for us, we did this incubator at the beginning where we all kind of like locked ourselves in a hotel and talked about people for a lot of the kinds of people that would be interesting to see and the kind of interactions. And of course, then you get into like, my relationship with my sister was like this, and it was always this. We give that to a character, and getting to sort of give us a bunch of North Stars. And luckily, a lot of those writers are our friends, so we also pull them back in at other parts in the process. On an episode they didn't write on and go, hey, this character is doing this, but you always really have a good handle on this character. Does that feel like, are we getting away from the North Star of the person? And I think for us, it's the only way that we really know how to tell stories, is to make sure that like everyone who's in the DNA of the thing signs off on it. Not necessarily, you know, everyone's not going to agree all the time, but agrees on the direction of the characters that we invented together. And so David and I have the 3 people that we each think Janelle is like, you know, but me and David's 3 might not be the same 3. And, you know, and Najla has her 3, and Alana has her 3, and Priscilla has her 3, and Benjamin has his 3. And I think with all of that, you get this pool of real people that become the threads for everything. And I think that's the way that we do best at chasing something sincere. And then I think we're both like obsessed with actors, and like all of our friends are performers and stuff. So if Jasmine's like, nah, we're like, never mind. Let's, you know, let's try it another way. Because we know as performers what it is when dialogue bumps and how uncomfortable it is to force an insincere moment because there's a time constraint, or because the director is just like, but that's the line. You know, it's like, no, it's gotta feel real. And every time we chase that thing, it tends to pay off. And so I think we keep doubling down on it.
Cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the casting. When you guys, I mean, obviously you still had Ashley, and I know you had some other people that you pulled in on the supporting roles or in guest star roles. But when you got to the casting part of it, was there like a list where you already kind of knew? Did you reach out to look for new faces? I knew a lot of the people came from the Bay Area as well. So like, how did that work?
Shout out Kim Harding Casting first, who cast the movie and cast the show. We had Jasmine and Benjamin already. Benjamin was in our writer's room. We've always thought of this role for him. And Jasmine, of course, was like, if it's not Jasmine, we're not doing it. So we knew we had this great
from way back too. Like, again, I always like to like emphasize to people how important, people always think networking is like going to an event and meeting the network president, a studio head or something, and then connecting.
Yeah, no, we've known Benny since he was 14.
Yeah,
like, since he was a kid. And to be clear, he's 30 now.
Yeah. And also, like, when you see him, I don't know, like, I don't think this show's still not out by the time people are watching this, but like when you see Ben over the course of this season, it's like, we look really smart, but we've just known this kid for a long time. Like, it's gonna feel like a discovery, but it's not. He's been this good for quite some time. And it was just like, and really like every step of the way, he's one of those people, you know, when you bring up somebody to a network or to a studio and they're gonna have to prove themselves. So we had to read for it. We were all like a little bit nervous about it because who knows if anyone sees the same thing that you see. And like the first tape got sent in and everyone was like, yep, great, signed off, hire him. Like, it was like 0 questions.
I think you read one scene and he like rapped a little.
Yeah, I mean, just when I met with him, just to talk about stuff, you know, our 10-minute conversation ended up lasting, you know, like 40 minutes of he just is so smart. And you just want to talk. He's one of those people that you just want to just be around. There's something about his energy and just the way he talks is really cool. So yeah, I could say great discovery, but you know him since he was a kid, so.
Yeah, and Benny's from the Bay, he's from Antioch. We cast Candace and Jalen through Kim, and so she found them. Candace is from Sacramento, Jalen's from down here in Southern California, and they, you know, they auditioned a bunch of times.
We read so many people for so many rounds. Like we were very careful about it.
We just wanted to find people who the Bay Area would believe, you know, if they weren't, you know, and because we did local searches too, and we were just like, well, we got to find people who can really carry a show, you know, and we'll do the story proud, and we landed on those two, who are brilliant in their own rights. And then we had been talking to Helen about Rainey for years. She was a fan of the movie and reached out, and so we became sort of fast friends via Twitter. And me like she fought
about, so for the people who don't
say what
they're saying it's Helen Hunt is acting.
Helen Hunt, sorry, yeah. So Helen Hunt plays my mom, plays sort of Ashley is like our mother-in-law to be, and she loved the film and was like very, very supportive of David and Mai's career. She had seen David in Hamilton as well, and reached out on Twitter, and we kind of all became friends. And when we thought of this show, we were like, well, what if Helen was the mom? Like, how crazy would that be? And we're like, she's never going to do it. But then we were getting ready to actually do the show. And I brought it up one more time. I was like, I mean, and you know, we wrote the mom role for you, but like, don't feel any pressure. You don't even have to read it. Just tell me you're busy and we'll move on. And I remember she was just like, well, let me read it. And we're like, oh, all right. And I called Diggs and I was like, she's going to read it. Like, she's going to look at it. We were like, oh my God, is there like a chance that she'll do this? And then she gave the most brilliant notes on not only the character, but the whole show. And you remember again that like Helen Hunt has been making television and films for our lifetimes and is a director and is a writer and has directed multiple features and like sat down with us and we're like, these are the things your characters need. And what about this? And listen to this question and go off and think about these things. And we suddenly realized like, oh man, even if she doesn't do this role, she just made the whole show better.
Yeah.
And I think it was that collaborative relationship that sort of sealed the deal that she was going to do the show, that we were like, we want more of this. We want more and more input because David and I don't know how to write a 50-something white woman from Oakland. Our mothers are sort of that, but like, you know, like it's different. You put pen to paper and you really have to get into the nuance. Like we know our mothers when we're around. We don't know our mothers when we're not around. Right? These are the moments where like more and more input really gives us a chance to go, how would this motivate? What are you thinking about at that point in your life? What, you know?
Yeah. There's a number of things in the script that are things that she just said in conversation, just sort of offhanded, like talking about the script, not even necessarily for her character, but she's, and we were so sure she was we kept being like, you got outs. We'll write you off whenever you get to, like, we can kill Rainey at any point. What do you need? Like, well, you know, like, just let us know. Just as long as you want to stay, please stay, because you make it better. So, yeah.
She's so thoughtful about all of her choices. You know, she never just does anything for the sake of doing something. She's always very good about having very thoughtful, you know, intention behind what she does. Is very
everything's motivated. Everything is and one of the things she said early on is a lot of her notes would be like, but why, like, how is the Rainey character serving the Ashley story in this moment? And I think lenses like that on a show, to know that, like, all right, the first thing is that Ashley's story is our centerpiece, right? She's our gateway into this world. And so even though every character, like every one of the characters has a storyline that separates from Ashley, like we don't only see them when they're with Ashley, they are their own characters in their own rights, but that is the through line to the thing. And so to reflect back on that and go, here are the notes from my character, and also how is my character serving the larger story, is just wisdom that I think we were lucky to have access to.
Wow, cool. All right, so what are some of the things now that you're in post on season 1, when season 2 comes around? Like, what are some things about season 1 that surprised you because you didn't think it was going to be that complicated, or surprised you because you didn't think it was going to be that easy? Or what were some of the things that either happy or sad surprises, or I mean, I don't want to put emotions on it like that, but just what are some of the things that were gifts that you got during season 1, and what are some things that you'll rethink for next time?
I don't know which bucket this falls into, but as an actor, I think I was totally unaware of how carefully everybody else in a production reads a script, because I sort of think of them as strong suggestions. And it turns out that, like, literally every department is trying to accomplish every single thing you said when you write it down. And we have a tendency to just put things in the scene direction that are like inside jokes to us, or like whatever, just like things to get through it. And then people start building something that you don't even remember writing in there. So that's been like an important learning curve, that like, oh yeah, you do have to, like, I'm gonna have to read this whole thing over before we send it out, and like make sure that everything's in here is something we might want to happen, because someone's gonna start building it and budgeting for it. And I honestly, maybe that sounds dumb, but I did not know that, because as an actor, you sort of like, my line, or,
I think in terms of sort of what we would do, well, the first thing we'll definitely do different next time, hopefully, is write all the scripts before we start shooting. If there's any way to do that, the freedom that it allows David and I to be meticulous about the other elements of the show can't be, that's the thing that we want, is to be as present as possible. And I think thinking 2 episodes ahead in terms of dialogue can be a little stressful. But the beauty of this process has been that we really lucked out with an amazing crew and an amazing cast that are all very kind people and collaborative people. And I think David and I have both been a part of other projects where that wasn't always the case, or it was a different energy on set. And I think we continue to kind of go by this philosophy that, like, the ship has to run on enthusiasm, and we have to have a little bit of a sense of humor about what we're making. I mean, our mantra is energy up, expectations down. And I think we do sort of live and create that way. Like, hey, we're going to try to make the thing, but if the crane breaks and, and the mirror, it can't get reset and the whatever, we'll just figure out something else. And I hope that we can hold on to that as the stakes raise or the expectations go up, that there's a scrappy, we'll just get it doneness that I think is the lifeblood of being an artist. And I can feel, especially when there's a lot more money involved in making a thing and a lot more people's reputations on the line, you feel, whether people are conscious of it or not, the threat to that creative process, because there's just so much more on it. So I do think, to a certain degree, it's me and David's job first to make it a safe environment. And then second, to be like a creatively safe environment for people to do what they got into this shit to do, and to make sure that everyone's getting as much creative freedom in their lane to have a good time and not be on their ass. And I think if anything, I think we did that almost with our muscle memory from related art forms on this the first time. And now that we've done it, to me, I think it's just become very sacred. Like it has to continue to be like this or it's not worth doing.
Yeah. I think when you talk about, oh, sorry.
I was gonna say the energy was great on set when I was there. It felt, you could tell from the top down that it was a kind of a no assholes, kindness first environment. So
that's good.
Yeah.
But sorry,
oh no, I think like when you talk about safety too, like, we shot this during COVID, and hopefully it is a lot easier to do next time. But there are certain like lessons. There's a certain kind of diligence that added to the process that I think we don't have to let go of. There's sort of a ritual that the COVID protocols enforced on everybody of like constantly checking in with different departments, and this culture of accountability, which mostly had to do with masks and shields, right? But bleeds over into everything. This sort of like, if you see something, say something like, we need you to feel safe on the set, and we need the set to actually be safe, and we can't get shut down because everyone's jobs are at stake. Like, so it really like, it created this situation where we were all like very responsible. It really felt like we were all responsible for each other's lives. And I would like it to get easier. I'd love to be able to like hang out without a 1,000 layers of protection between us. I hope that is the case by the time we shoot season 2, but like that spirit of constantly checking in with each other and making sure that everyone is okay and safe in all of the ways that can be interpreted, I think is something I'd like to keep with me for the future of how I work on projects.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I hear you on the in terms of communicating, just because there's so much communicating as a director, from my point of view, even just talking to you guys, let alone talking to the actors and the actors talking to each other. It always felt like the first take was really the rehearsal, because that's the first time everybody didn't have all the stuff on.
Yeah.
You'd actually feel the real energy flowing back and forth was more real of what it was going to be, versus like having what felt like the dog cone wearing around your head, but it felt, I mean, it did. I've been on a few different sets since the protocols were in place, and some felt like I've had friends that are on other shows that they're just like, I had a friend that was on a show that was like, are you doing this show? I don't know if I would do this show. Just because people were not being as careful about stuff, and then some shows you can tell everybody. I remember saying to myself, oh, I ran out of something. Maybe I should stop by the store on the way home. And someone was like, it was like a random like grip that I didn't even know. It was like, you can order Amazon delivery. And I'm like, oh yeah, right. Trying to help me out so I don't have to go into a store, because why take the risk if I don't have to take the risk? And no one wants to be the outbreak monkey, So it felt like you were taking care of each other. There was this kind of like taking care of each otherness that you feel that's there too. So, all right. So in terms of from Blindspotting feature to Blindspotting series, what doors, like, I remember you saying something, David, about like Hamilton helped open the door to getting the first Blindspotting, like getting attention from that helped with getting attention for Blindspotting, right? So when you got attention from Blindspotting the feature, what other doors did that open for other outlets besides just the series?
Well, I mean, the feature, it's really interesting in this business. Rafael was just saying this earlier, like once you've done something, everyone wants to talk to you about doing something. I mean, I think the fact that we had made a movie made the nature of the meetings very different from that point on, because I think we were sort of understood of as like creators in a different way. So we had created the thing that existed, and so I think, and I think even the beginnings of this, so now like in the television world, like now we have a show that's in production that we've created, and the nature of the meetings changes again. Like the things that people start to ask you if you would be interested in doing are like, it just keeps widening the net, which is nice, I think. You know, I'm so suspicious of like the ease with which doors open sometimes after like having done a thing, you know, because I don't know, you don't necessarily like find the collaborators who are going to allow you to fail spectacularly, which you need that, you know, like, so I don't know, but what's the scope of working in television, the amount of different people that are required to make a TV show is really nice, because there's space to do some of the like artist development that we were offered for in a lot of different areas. And like, so much of it doesn't require us to do all of it, right? An introduction is like, you know, oh yeah, I don't want to work on your show, but I, who have a TV show, so I know what I'm talking about and recommending this person, you know, like, all you have to do is do that. And like, it goes a lot farther the more things you've successfully made. And I think the term successful so far only applies to the existence, right? I don't know like how much the like actual success of the thing comes into play often, because like, we're so content hungry, the industry is so content hungry, that like you just have to, but like there is this barrier of having had to make something that I get to a certain degree, you know, you just have to examine the reasons why some of us haven't been allowed to make things.
So do you feel that, do you enjoy the, now that there's more possibilities, is more possibilities cooler, or does more possibilities get overwhelming? Like, I mean, I know it's not infinite, but the kinds of things, is it almost like, there's more than one thing to choose from? Now, is there more than one thing that you're working on of your own thing? And like, which one do you work on first and which one do you work on second? And like, what are the kind of like good problems to have that are coming from, you know, having completed a feature and a series? I mean, because I'll tell you, just when I've had meetings before I even did the episode, when people are like, you know, well, what do you have coming up? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to be directing a Blindspotting, and people would bug out over the fact that, and you guys would only had been shooting like maybe a couple of episodes at that point. Like, so the hype behind just that me as an arbitrary part of that whole machine is getting a little boost from that. I can't imagine what kind of stuff you guys are getting thrown at you.
Yeah, I mean, and I think like David and I are received one way together and one way separately, right? And I think we also had a lot of the same goals going in, and then also like, you know, different degrees of weight. Like obviously Diggs isn't on the show. This wasn't like I'm trying to get my actor's card in on this one for him. Like this, I was like, I want to direct an episode. That was the thing. I was like, I'm directing an episode. And these were the important sort of boxes to check. And then I think we were excited to see what did it mean to be the head writers on the show, and, you know, co-creators of a thing, and what responsibilities does that put on you. And so I think what that has begun to open up more than anything. I think people are still coming to us going like, would you be interested in this? I think we have a little bit clearer sense of what roles we'd like to participate in projects, which has been really helpful. I think we both have a better understanding of what it means to be an executive producer on a thing. I think understanding what does it mean to direct one episode or two episodes back to back or three, like now I'm aware of the physical exhaustion of 5 days of shooting as a director, and like why you don't necessarily want to do two, or if you do, it's got to be something that you love and you're ready to give that energy to. I think we're just more aware also just like the physical exhaustion of shooting with that much going on in your brain all the time. And so I think we're gaining more and more clarity on the capacities in which we would like to be involved in things, and like which capacities are reserved for other people's projects that we want to help with, and which ones are really sacred to our projects. I'm like, so when we're like, we're going to write a thing, I think for the most part now, it's going to be our shit. You know, like I'm not writing nobody else's shit because it's exhausting and it requires so much love and attention. And then and then there's certain skills that I would love to go and direct somebody else's thing, because then it's just that hat and I can just focus on that. And I know like David, we're both executive producing other projects. David's got a few in the can that he's working on right now. And that's a muscle, not to speak for him, but that's a muscle like that you told me a number of times, bro, like this, we didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, even before we were already signed on to other stuff. And now we're like, oh, I get the role.
Yeah.
This is my job and this isn't my job. And so I think it's just been very helpful in knowing how to navigate when people come to us and say, do you want to do this project, to know, is it a no? Is it a this? Is it this? Is it this version of this? Is it a yes? Is it even worth us talking about doing together? Is this something that like, I know that Diggs doesn't want nothing to do with, or he knows I don't want nothing to do with? It's just been very, very clarifying in terms of the way in which we, something becomes worth the time, because we just don't have a lot of time, to be artists in this life. We don't get a lot of chances to make things that fulfill us. And so when there is more than one option, which both of us having spent a ton of time with zero options, except for the things we made up for ourselves that we spent our fucking lunch money on, that no one fucking saw or cared about, like having already taken all the love we have for a thing and made a thing for 500 people. Now, if it's going to be like our whole year of time away from our, partners and our homes and our dogs and our parents and our, siblings, like it's gotta be full of like love and enthusiasm. And so I think that's really become, and again, like you said about our set, like, and it's top down. Like if we're in love with it, there's a way better chance that other people get to also be in love with it. And if it's just kind of this thing that we're doing for a check, or because somebody offered to do it, so we don't know there's shit going on. Like you feel that. I've been on people's shows that feel like that. And it's like, nah, I don't. If I'm lucky enough, if we're lucky enough to be in any like position of authority on a project, like we got to bring like love and enthusiasm to it, or don't fucking do it. Let somebody else sit in that chair.
Yeah, it's fun to be on a set where the crew is geeked out about what you're shooting. Like we did a shot where we were like, shout out to the grip crew for how they did it. And like the crew like clapped after we got the shot because it was such a cool shot. And, especially with an LA crew, sometimes shooting in a smaller town where there's not as many LA people, but LA crews can get really jaded sometimes. And, when you see them being like, yeah, that was cool. I mean, that's exciting to be around. And then it makes you even more excited about the thing that you're already excited about, which is cool.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we be having fun. I mean, at the end of the day, like me and Diggs are sitting there being like, look at this fucking shot. This is so cool. Like, what we did. And sometimes we're just like, I can't believe they gave us money to do this.
Yeah, why would you let somebody do this? It's amazing.
I think like we're still such nerds about it, and I think we're just trying to preserve that at all times. Like, and it's nice when you have like, when your closest friend is there for you to like, it's like when you're at a party and you lock eyes and something weird is happening and you lock eyes with your friend and you're like, yo, you're seeing this, right? Like we're having that on set every day.
Every day. Yeah.
Every other moment, like it feels like too. It's cool.
That's fun. Yeah, it's just fun.
You said something earlier about people see you guys sometimes as a team differently as they do separately. So I know, I have people and friends that, and I know people that work together as a team and then sometimes they want to do their own thing. And how does that work in your relationship? And I know sometimes people get sometimes in their feelings about, I've seen that happen where you have a partnership and then somebody's like, no, I still want to do the partnership, but I also want to do this thing on my own. Like, how did you guys navigate that, being kind of like, homies in the beginning? And then now people see you as a team and you want to go do your own thing. Do you talk about it, or like, how does that work?
Well, I didn't get offered The Little Mermaid, so the Triton was already cast. No, I think at least for me, like it's case by case basis. I think like I have a pretty open door policy about anything that I'm working on for Diggs. Like if Diggs is like, I want in on that, it's like, all right, we'll figure that out, But I think generally we've always had a bunch of stuff going on, even when nobody cared about it. Mm-hmm. And we just talk about what's exciting to us. And like, I think we try to like respond to the enthusiasm. My general sense is like, if Diggs is excited, him being involved is going to make anything that I'm doing significantly better. And it's always worth whatever it's going to take to make it happen. So again, led by enthusiasm. If Diggs is like, that's tight, I'm like, oh, all right, you're like activated. Let's do this, And if I'm activated on my own shit, then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go knock this out. But I think generally it's chasing that, like, are we amped up about this? Let's do something. And then figure out how it fits together.
Yeah. I mean, same for me. I think like, what's been interesting is because for the beginnings of our careers, if you can call them that, or like at the time, at least, like when we first, when we were first making music and stuff, like Rafa was putting me on all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like that's like, and I think sometimes when you look, like if you knew me post Hamilton, like, and then you discovered Rafa, like there's sometimes a narrative that it works the other way. And it never, like, to me, it was never like Rafa spent so much of his own money to bring me to tour engagements that I was not invited to, right? Like, like he spent so much time like plugging my music to radio stations that didn't want to listen to it. Like he was always my biggest cheerleader. And like, and so like on the rare occasion that it had to happen the other way, like post Hamilton, all this stuff starts coming at me. I don't even know how to deal with it. Like Rafa's biggest role in my life at that point is like as my therapist. Like it's like my bro, like I'm terrified all the time right now, and I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who I am. Like but like the thing about having an artist who's your friend, but who is so good, like I never had any hesitation if someone's like, what about this guy, Rafael Casal? Yes, hire it. What do you mean? If he wants to do it, you should work with him. You should be so lucky to work with that guy. Like, I don't know, like what else I can tell you. And if somebody wants us to do something together, like it's obviously yes, if we're both excited about it, but like, I think, there's been a couple moments where we've had to have these, like, because your teams start getting involved and you start like, like a whole bunch of other people start having input particularly on the way that you choose things, right? And like it's easy to get sort of derailed by that in some ways, and like we've had a couple of moments, although I think relatively few based on like how crazy the last bunch of years have been, but like we had a couple of moments where it's been like, we need to talk about this now and straight out what's like cipher out what is us and what is them. And then once we're clear on that, then it makes it very easy to deal with the them part of it, which is literally everybody who ain't us. And
that's a muscle that like you don't know you need. Like the industry starts going and like there's money and there's credits and there's visibility and like who people think are doing stuff. Like there's all these narratives that come in and everyone is advocating for you. And it gets very, very confusing. And you're so used to negotiating your career being like, what are we doing? What time's the show? You getting this much? We cut the door, and you go from that life to like, how many tail slate credits? You get this one and this one. What unions does that qualify? So you're going to check here, and I'm going to check here. Like, and it starts getting crazy. And you have to like keep resetting and going like, what are we doing? What do you want to get out of it? What's really important for me to get out of it? And I think luckily, if you have a really strong foundation of friendship, you can be like, oh, that's what you want to get out of it? Cool. I want that for you. Okay, cool. So how do we finesse this thing that we invented out of fucking thin air that now other people are involved in to make sure that before they get their chips, we get ours? And that's why we did it. And so I think a lot of it has been us reminding each other all the time, like, oh man, we let them get on the phone before we got on the phone. We fucked up. All right, let's like pause them motherfuckers and like decide what this is. And then we'll go tell them what to go chase because most of them work for us. You know, so we've had those moments of like, you know, because
the reps will get ahead of you. You know what I mean? Like they'll think that.
I'm not even just the red. Look, our reps are great. We love them to death. Like those people are keeping any machine that we have going. So it's not like specifically them, but I think like the industry is built to try to sort of get your people or your star or your narrative up. And it's not really built. I mean, it's like the DGA is not built for duo directors. You know, like the industry is not necessarily built for like duo best friend writer, director, actors, rappers. Like it's not built like that. So we have to do a little bit of teaching of like, all right, I realize that there isn't a model for the thing that we do sometimes. We need to teach you how to deal with us and how we'd like to do it. And I think sometimes it is a little mind-boggling when we're like, we want to do it this way and we want to cut these people in on this and we want to, you know, it's really important to us that we go about it this way, and it's not financially intuitive for folks sometimes.
It is a really like, the industry is not set up in any way to understand why you would leave any dollar on the table for yourself, right? And that's not like, it's not like as if we're being generous or anything here. It's that like, we only know how to work this way. And so like when you start to, and it's, that works the same for potential money. You know what I'm saying? So when like I am like, this credit would be really important for my life, and Rafa says, yeah, you should have that, take that one solo or whatever. And then like the machine, the Hollywood machine is like, you can't do that. You can't, like, what do you mean? You can't, like, no, you can't like, and it's like, well, we can, because that's how we said we're doing it. Like you know, we've realized that like we have to divide up labor on our own terms and also divide up credit on our own terms, and also like figure out how to let everybody else in on that. You know, like the way that writers are credited has very little reflection necessarily on how the thing was actually made. But like, so for us who didn't know how to do it anyway, it was like, what's useful? What's the most useful thing for you? What is the most useful credit for you to have in this moment? And can we make that happen? You know?
Yeah. I think that's been the big thing, is like every time we move forward a little bit. I mean, we make this joke all the time that every time we open a door into a new level of the thing where like we expect that that's where the adults are. And you open the room and it's just you and me and Doug in there, and we're like, oh, we're the fucking adults. You know, we keep having that experience. And so every time we run up against a mechanism of the industry that doesn't make sense for us, even though sometimes it takes us a second to kind of like get our bearings, we're like, oh, this is the thing again. The thing is happening again, where we have to redefine this on our own terms or don't do it. And you know, I think the more we go through that, the more our muscle gets stronger individually and with each other to go, hey, you remember that thing that always like kind of catches us off guard? It's happening. Or it's happening to somebody we know in our process. Let's finesse that. It's, you know, how do we support our writers better? How do we support our actors better? How do we support our crew better? And recognize that like we're going to keep bumping up against things that we've never dealt with before. And you hear about them and someone's like, I don't like this, or this didn't go the way I wanted to, or whatever. And we go, okay, let's give us the lay of the land. What do you want? Like, what is the thing that would serve you best? Here's what we can do for each other or for this person or whatever.
Yeah, but it's almost good that you haven't had to deal with it before, because then you come at it from a not everyday perspective, where like a lot of people would be like, well, that's the way it's done, so that's the way it's done. You know what I mean? Like, so you can come in and say like, well, that's not how we're doing it, because you don't know that that's the way it's done. So
we can plead ignorant a lot. You know, like, well, that's not how it's done. It's like, I don't know, whatever, try. We'll get that. And yeah, you push back until you can't push back anymore. And then sometimes you realize it's going to take 2 years to do it that way. And some back and they go, oh, no, you totally can do it that way. And you're like, yeah, see, we just had to try, not function on autopilot. But industry's problems have mostly been based on autopilot, like deciding it was going to be a certain way and being like, but that's how we do things. And I don't know, this is that time where all those things should get questioned constantly. It's generally the new artists that do that because they don't do better.
Well, I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you so much for taking the time. I said my last question for you guys is just, you know, what is the future right now look like for you guys? What do you guys have coming up, and what do you hope to have? You know, like, what is your dream thing that you would love to do that's out there? Whether it's a project or whether it's just, like you said, putting people on, you know, like, what is it?
I mean, we're trying to finish Blindspotting at the moment. We gotta get through this season.
We're like literally going from this to the edit. Like
yeah, this was our dinner break. We're like, but I mean, you know, I think we both have like many other projects that are in various states of neglect at the moment, and like will probably continue to be, because this is the one we're currently enthusiastic about. But at a certain point, we got to wrap those other ones up. And I don't know. I mean, the ability to this producing thing is interesting to me. The more I do it, the more interesting it gets, because of the different levels of involvement you can have that are all useful, right? And to be able to, like, a few of the projects that I'm an executive producer on now are with people who are so capable that not really doing anything except opening the door, and then, like, when I am needed, popping back in to be like, who's giving you shit? All right, hold on, and go back and be like, this is why that choice is right. And then somebody leaves them alone for 6 weeks, and then I get to come back and be like, what's happening? All right, hold on a second. And that level of usefulness, I think, for artists that I know and have grown up with and believe in, is really gratifying. And so I like that, and it also, like, just balancing the time. You know, COVID has been a crazy thing. I've been separated from my partner for so many months at this point, because we're not allowed to go see each other, because we both work in TV shows where the cross-pollination of shows can't happen. So, like, it's tough. And so I start like, the things that I'm going to be boots on the ground for, I'm going to be a lot more careful of once the deck is finally cleared. But I think finding out what the couple of things that we already have in the works that will be that I'm very excited about. Like, those are the fun ones, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I like Dave said, like, we both have things that we're both involved in together and separately, and, you know, that they are highly neglected. Just, you know, because I think this show, the thing is, when we, like, fall in love with a project, like, we're obsessive people. And so, like, we just talk about it nonstop and want it to be perfect, especially because it's like a hometown story. Like, we're really obsessed because we want to get it right. I think every next thing needs to feel like it's coming from that same place. And so without getting specific, but, like, David and I have a few projects together that we're really excited about, that, like, we'll finish a conversation of like 3 hours about Blindspotting. We'll be like, but then there's that one, we got to get on that, you know, because we're excited about that. And, like, there's moments where I remember that, like, Diggs and I had so much fun acting together in the movie. We're like, we should do another thing where we, like, get to just kind of be silly. I think we keep joking that, like, we just want to do a straight funny movie that doesn't deal with shit serious, just so we can kind of be goofballs. But I think to get, like, together and with Jess and Keith, what's fun is we do have permission to dream into whatever is going to sort of carry us into the next creative, you know, venture of our careers. And I think what's becoming more and more true for me is, I think you get into the industry and people are like, oh, I'll get a project here and do another project over here and do this, you know, and more you kind of realize you just want to hug the people that give you permission to be yourself and give you really safe spaces to be an artist. And I think probably a younger me would have thought at this point, I'd be, like, really trying to spread out and do a bunch of stuff. And it's the opposite. I'm like, my friends list is dropping drastically, and my, like, collaborators are so specific. I'm like, I want to work with you and you and you. And, like, we were joking earlier, we're like, if Taran isn't available for Deeping season 2, we're not doing it. You know, like, we grab our people and we're like, we love this person. We want to make things with this person, because more and more, like, especially during COVID, you realize that collaborative time is really precious, and quality of life and joy is very, very precious. And I think we both are always looking for our artist peers and mentors and mentees who are carrying a similar torch. And when we see that, we go, what do you want to do? You know, and try to see how we can maybe help make that idea happen, or they might be able to help us make an idea happen and chase that same thing together.
Thank you guys again so much. I know you guys got to get back to work. I appreciate you giving me your lunch or your dinner break. Rafael Casal, David Diggs. We got Blindspotting coming out sometime this summer, depending on when.
Angela directed episode 7. It's gonna be dope.
Wow,
that's Starz. So subscribe to Starz now so y'all can watch it. And I will see you guys in the streets. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us in the streets, Zoom streets. Later.